All right, first topic of this week will be the characteristics of life. So we are now back to chapter 1, and if you look in the upper top of the page, you'll see that they will list the learning outcomes for the chapter. So to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, in your book, whether it's electronic or physical, you can see the purple box has the learning objectives. I will always tell you which learning objectives you need to know. So the first learning objective we will cover in chapter 1 is the first one there, which is explain the characteristics common to all living things. So the first thing that is common to all living things is life is organized. And we can see this in figure 1-2. So on the page adjacent to that learning objective, there's a large figure. We will start off in chapter 2, and we will start talking about the smallest units of life, or living or non-living. Atoms, these are the smallest units of matter. We will then put atoms together and we will form molecules and compounds. These are two terms that I'll use interchangeably, but they do have their own unique characteristics. Collections of atoms are molecules. You're going to notice we've started with the smallest units. We're going to start building bigger and bigger things. We can put molecules and compounds together, and this one is not in the list, but it's an important word to know. We create organelles. When we were talking about the cell, we talked about a lot of different organelles. The nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum, the chloroplast, the mitochondria, the lysosome. All of these are organelles. They are collections of molecules and compounds. And we'll discuss them in different detail throughout the semester. We then put all the organelles together, and then we finally get our cell. And that is our basic fundamental unit of life. So this is the smallest units of matter. This is the smallest unit of life. So I can tell you right now, you'll say I'm asking you a tricky question, but I will ask you probably a multiple choice question, and it'll either have this definition or this definition. Atoms are the smallest units of matter. Cells are the smallest units of life. This will be what we go over in 110. This is our goal, to get you all the information you need to know on this level of the organizational life so that you can go on to take anatomy and physiology, genetics, or microbiology. Because we'll take those cells, and this is where you'll start in A and P, and you will put them into tissues. So tissues are a collection of cells. Those tissues we will put together and create organs. So an organ is a collection of tissues. With my A and P class today, we were actually going over the organ, the bone. A bone is a collection of different tissues. It has bone tissue, it has blood tissue, it has nervous tissue, it has connective tissues that hold it together. So a bone, one organ, is made up of several different tissues. Those organs are then put into organ systems. So each bone is an organ. All 206 bones of your body become the skeletal system, an organ system. And then finally, we put all of our organ systems together, and there are 11. And this becomes the organism. So these are the levels of how life is organized. A second characteristic common to all living things. And you'll notice that these are the section headers from here on out. Life needs materials and energy. So life needs materials and energy. Basically what it's saying is we need building blocks, materials that we can put together using energy, and all of these will be comprised in what is called our metabolism. Your metabolism is the collection of all of the equations that put materials together using energy in order to build our organism. The next one, these, like I say, are right on our page. We need to maintain a steady internal environment. There's a fancy word for this. This is called homeostasis. Homeo means same. Stasis means steady. We need a steady internal environment. As an example, temperature. You need to maintain a temperature of about 98.6 or 37 degrees Celsius. When you don't, if you get too hot or you get too cold, it's very hard for the metabolic processes occurring here to be able to do what they need to do. This is why if your temperature gets too hot, you die. If your temperature gets too cold, you die. We need to have a steady internal environment so that all those processes of life can come out. Another thing common to all living things is we respond to stimuli. Living things respond to their environment. We can even match that up with this previous one. When it's too cold outside, you put on a coat. You've responded to a stimulus. The stimulus was cold weather, cold temperatures. So you put on a jacket, that is a response. You stub your toe on a rock or you get hit by a thorn. You feel pain, that is a response to stimuli. Another one, all living things reproduce and develop. So reproduce means you create offspring, a new generation. So organisms need to be able to pass on their genetic information from one generation to the next. So being able to reproduce means that you create offspring. Develop means that you change over time. So you will start off as a single cell. So here's the single cell. This is called a zygote. So when your mom's egg meets your dad's sperm, it produces a single cell called a zygote. You will then undergo mitosis, and you will, over time, become multicellular. And then over time, different parts of those cells will begin to specialize. Some will become the nervous system, some will become the skeletal system, some will become the muscular system. You change over time. And then lastly, and this is a bigger concept than the individual, but living organisms, they adapt to the environment. This means that genetics will change from generation to generation. So adaptation means that different genes will be selected for depending on the environment you're in. And the ones that have a more successful rate called fitness will allow more offspring to exist in the next generation. There is no good or bad in an environment. There's no good or bad genes. There are just environments, there are just genes, and organisms will change over time through their populations as they adapt to those different environments. And this is why there's not a good gene or a bad gene. There are just genes. And those genes allow us to meet the conditions of our environment. I think that's all. So those are the 6 different characteristics common to all living things.